My name is Lynn McEntee. Welcome to Spotlight on Community, a program sponsored by Moksha Canada Foundation. We're very, very happy to be joining you again for the second week to discuss domestic violence with our expert guests. We have Jensen Williams and Sarah Bowers-Peter, who is from Crime Stoppers, and Jensen Williams from Women in Crisis in Guelph-Wellington area. We also have Sunil Channon, who is a Moksha Canada founder and is joining us today. And thank you to Moksha Canada for allowing us to do this program. For anybody who's just joining us this week, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Moksha Canada and why we're doing this program and the awareness that we're trying to raise and how important it is, not only in Canada, Ontario, but our communities across Ontario as well. Moksha Canada Foundation, we are excited to launch this program. The purpose of the program is to raise awareness, to find creative ways to address the issues that affect our diverse communities across Canada. Moksha Canada Foundation is a registered not-for-profit community organization which works towards ensuring the well-being of individuals, families, and diverse communities in Canada through the provision of essential social services, community development, art and cultural programs. We are excited to connect, create, and participate with you today through Spotlight on Community. Welcome to our guests. Welcome back, Jensen Williams and Sarah Bowers-Peter. Welcome. So thank you so much. We kind of dropped off last week talking about resources, accessibility, and how we can break down barriers for people to understanding the programs that you both have to offer. And Jensen, I'm going to start out with you for Women in Crisis and how important it is to reach the very young and get the knowledge out early on for people about the resources that are available and breaking down any misconceptions what Women in Crisis might be about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people often ask me how young is too young to start learning about consent and healthy relationships and everything that goes into your knowledge about your own personal life and your relationships with other people. And I say as early as you can. I mean, we talk about consent with kids of being able to, is it okay if I hug you? Or is it okay if, and I'm using those boundaries and establishing those from a young age, recognizing that people have the agency over their own bodies, of their own lives, and what it looks like to have a healthy relationship. And that relationship is not just a romantic relationship, but relationships in terms of friendships, in terms of relationships with your family members and community members. So I would say that education for youth is a key pillar in violence prevention, because we know that our ideas about relationships, about consent, our bodies, sexuality, they start at a young age. And so I think that as early as you can get in to talk about those issues, the better. And that is only more beneficial. So I think youth is a really critical age, particularly when we think about youth around grade 7 and 8 as they're starting to develop their relationships with other people, because we know that for youth who may have parents who have an abusive relationship, that it's more likely that they will have abusive behaviors in their relationships as well. So getting and starting young with that intervention of recognizing the difference between healthy conflict in a relationship and abusive behaviors is really key, and teaching kids about consent and the importance of consent in terms of your everyday relationships, but in the context of a sexual communication, and knowing the difference between healthy relationships and being able to communicate your boundaries with one another is really crucial to that education and getting in and accessing youth. And I know Sarah mentioned earlier in our previous session about online exploitation and being mindful of what youth are engaging with online. So I think just really getting in there to provide them with a critical lens of the relationships with themselves and other people will only help serve to have a strong foundation for adulthood of healthy relationships and boundaries and healthy communication and relationships as well as a tactic around violence prevention. So I think that might be one of the misconceptions of what we do at Guelph-Wellington Women in Crisis. Not everyone may know that education is part of the work that we do, recognizing that we firmly believe that people's behaviors and actions can be changed through the power of education. And it is talking about accessibility, a matter of making that education as accessible as possible.
Sarah, thank you. That's incredible. Thank you very much. Sarah, did you want to jump in to add something to that before we open up the discussion with Sunil?
Sure. So as far as the age that we like to engage with our young people, we usually start around grade 5. And the reason for that is our police partners often have their own initiatives for youth engagement. And we don't want to make it a confusing conversation for our young people. So, there's whether it's OPP kids, there's the DARE program, things like that, that are often initiated. I know Guelph Police Service in our area also has their own youth engagement program. So we feel that by the time we get into grade 5, that's the opportune time to have the conversation about, the nuances of reporting crime. We also find with our position as being a community engagement educator, role, that's when we start having the conversation about what we've just referred to with the online grooming and social media engagement and things like that, and how you don't realize these things are happening, that when someone's asking for an image or to engage in conversation with you. So we find that grade 5 tends to be the age that we start with. And we've had very positive feedback from our educators by, using that as the jumping point. And we, of course, we go right through, high school, would be open to presenting at a college or university as well. But yeah, we find that any younger than that, it can get a little confusing, and we're not there to traumatize or to confuse. We want to make sure that we're providing quality information that is helpful. And whenever I am in the classroom and we have handouts that we're giving to the young people, I always say to them, take this home to your people. You've got homework for everyone at home. Make sure that they go through everything that we've talked about today and share that information. And again, it's a different way of hearing about Crime Stoppers through their through their children, and getting it from, a conversation going about what they did at school that day.
Sunil, anything you wanted to add or question? No? Then I'm curious then, how do you take out the fear factor if someone is afraid to share that information at home? How would one get around that, I guess, so to speak, in terms of keeping the information with them, should they need it at some point in the future, but not necessarily being able to voice or share it at home?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I've not had a lot of feedback with that being a concern. And especially with the younger ones, it's more of a case of, hey, guess what we talked about at school today? And here's, a card from Crime Stoppers, and here's a pen, and handy giveaways like that. I do find that the older my audience is in the school environment, I oftentimes will have 1 or 2 students that will offer to help me take things back to the parking lot as I unload for the day, and they'll want to talk to me a little more about Crime Stoppers. I've had people disclose to me some pretty traumatic incidents in their life, and that's where I personally really find it advantageous to work with Guelph-Wellington Women in Crisis. And recently we just did that trauma-informed session, Jensen, not too long ago. And I always look forward to those types of awareness and educational opportunities, because you don't know when a young person is going to come forward and need a little support, even though I'm not the person that can help them. But I'm going to give them Jensen's information, because that's who they could be connecting with and getting some help. But to answer your question there, when it comes to what happens in the home, we do talk to them about the fact that there are other people in their lives that they can talk to, that there is a school resource officer in all schools, that there is a principal or a trusted teacher. We always use the trusted adult scenario. If there's someone they want to communicate with, if they don't feel comfortable, talking about Crime Stoppers at home, that maybe there's something they need to talk to someone about, they can engage with someone in their school environment as well. And we don't advocate for the really young student to contact Crime Stoppers. We frame it more in the lens of, here's information that you might need someday, right? Because I don't want a 10-year-old calling me or an 8-year-old calling me, giving me that kind of information. It can be traumatizing for them too, but understanding how it works, maybe when they're 13, 14, 15, that could be really helpful information and help get them out of a very uncomfortable situation.
Thank you. Jensen, could you then speak to that if Sarah was to, let's say, perhaps refer a client to you or someone that's looking for some additional help in that regard? what would that look like, if you don't mind, for any of us that don't really know? What would you do at that point, should you get that referral?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one resource that we have a purple card that we often give out to anyone who wants them, and they have our phone line number as well as crisis line and numbers for other agencies in the community that could provide assistance. And so that's a really great subtle way, and we give those to anyone to be able to, if they're in a situation, provide a quick, I'm not entirely sure what you're looking for. Here are some numbers that might be able to provide some further support. And so that's why we also publicize our crisis information, our crisis line info, I would say the most, is because that's the best way to kind of get that immediate access to service and provides intake to our services, as well as provides information about other services in the community as well. So that's one way. And I think part of what Sarah's saying too is that when we do our training about how to respond to a disclosure, we try to make that training as accessible and available to anyone, not just service providers, because we know that it's not always individuals don't always seek out support in formal ways. They could ask a family member, they could ask a trusted adult at school, they could ask a friend, and you might not know what to do or be able to provide someone with all the supports they need, nor is it expected that you will. But that's why it's so important to engage in sessions like this, to familiarize yourself with what resources might exist in the community, even just a basic information of having a crisis line number on hand. So if folks, like Sarah had a purple card or had information, and that really they could just mean that they direct them towards a number that they can call or a website where they can access more information. I think that is a really key way, and why individuals are so important in this work to provide a point of contact. I was just saying that's why it's so important for all individuals in the community, to be aware of what services might exist. And even if it means not knowing and doing a quick Google search on your phone to find a crisis line number, to find a website that has more information.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. No, thank you very, very much. Sunil, anything you wanted to jump in terms of? No, I'm sort of working with international students and newcomers that we spoke about before, and accessibility and making the information user-friendly, if you will. How do you get the information across with, in the communities, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. I could start with that one. So part of what we do with what we're trying to do anyways is to make our information. So we have brochures about our services that we hand to different service providers in multiple different languages. We work as well very frequently with our local immigrant services agency, who is an excellent resource for us. We also do work with interpreters who can help those who English might not be their first language access our services in the language of their choice. So we have a great network of interpreters that we work with to make our services accessible to newcomers and new Canadians, as we know that there are increased barriers for these populations to even know how to access our services or what services are available in the community, and working with other community partners as well who do programming for newcomers specifically, and getting into those programs to do information sessions as well is something that is part of our programming to make that as accessible as possible.
Mm-hmm. And that's been ongoing for some time now, at least more than a decade, at least, making, resources available in different languages, 20 years even, perhaps, for that matter. But it just depends on, I guess, perhaps the community, perhaps, and what's available. But I think that is the ultimate goal, is to provide resources to as many people as possible. Right? Yeah, for sure. Can then we go back to, if you don't mind, maybe Sarah, the other work that you're doing through Crime Stoppers. We are talking about domestic violence, but what is some of the other work that you provide? Please and thank you.
Well, I'm going to leap off what we just talked about with immigration and language barriers, because it is something actually we've been dealing with. Is that we also are working with immigration services within our area and reaching out into those communities, because we know we're a multicultural society. We need to be doing better with that. Also, we've had a very solid relationship with our schools, particularly in the city of Guelph, where I was doing presentations like 5 and 6 in a day with English as a second language class at John F. Ross in particular, and Guelph Collegiate School. Wonderful interactive, in person when we could do it like that, experiences. And for those young people, I was always so delighted to go into those classrooms because these were young people that were so invested and had such interesting questions and such genuine responses. And I always enjoyed going into the classrooms for that. So I just wanted to speak to that as well. But as far as some of the other initiatives that Crime Stoppers is working on, we have always had like a Crime Stoppers 101, everything you've ever wanted to learn about Crime Stoppers. We do presentations on that topic. We also have a program that is directed at seniors, because that demographic, that age group, they were very much raised in the idea of mind your own business, and kind of what we talked about before is, keep things quiet, and you're not comfortable sharing a lot of information, especially private personal information, in a more public way, outside of the family when I say public. So we address seniors in that way. We also have our student presentation, which I alluded to earlier. We talk about why it's so important as a young person to be a good community citizen, and what it means to give back and create a safe environment, whether you're in high school, college, or out in the working world. Those are all important times to have a safe environment. And then also we have human trafficking, which is something that we have felt very passionate about since 2016 when we first became aware of it. We know that it's happening in the city of Guelph and the county of Wellington. And if you're familiar with our community, you know that Guelph is our urban center, and there's a large county that surrounds it. And most people in the county think human trafficking is a Guelph problem, or a Toronto problem, or an Ottawa problem. They don't think it's happening in the county. And again, I know Jensen would be the first person to tell you that we know otherwise. It is absolutely happening in the county of Wellington, in these more rural areas. Internet, connecting online is a blessing and a curse. And people are using that as a way to exploit young people and connect with them and lure them into that crime. So, we want to get out there to the young people and the community at large first. And it's a tough topic. I'm not going to lie. Doing a human trafficking presentation, it's hard. And at the end of it, I'm always kind of fired up and you have a lot of adrenaline, a lot of energy, but it's so important. I would rather do that presentation, as difficult as it may be, if it means there's going to be someone who can see the signs early on, or someone that can prevent their child or a young person they care about from being groomed. Like it's worth the conversation, even though, and in some communities, having a conversation about sex trafficking is taboo, but we have to go there to keep our young people safe. We also have an interesting way to deliver that program. We created a program called EPAC, which is Educate Parents and Children Together. And what we would do during normal times is we would be hosted by a sports team, youth group, or a school. And I would go in, and then depending on where it was located, either in the city or the county, I would invite my Guelph colleague that I mentioned, Constable Hugh Curry, or my colleague in the county to join me. And we would take parents in one room and young people in another room. And I would start with the parents, and I would do the talk on human trafficking and how Crime Stoppers is here as a way to combat human trafficking by reporting. And then my colleague, my police partner, would be in the other room with the young people, and he or she, depending on who it is, would then go through the whole process of discussing why is social media a bit of a problem, and what does child exploitation, cyber luring, what does all that look like? And you can see the kids, the lights go on when they understand this is what they're talking about and this is what's happening. And then we switch audiences. So after I've talked to the parents and they're wound up and their eyes are open to what they've just learned, they go over to the police partner and have the conversation about what platforms are problematic, how they can look at their child's phone and understand what they're seeing with different apps and conversations. And then I get the young people, and then I explain to them, you've already learned about luring and cyber safety and why that's so important. And now we're going to tell you a little bit of age-appropriate content on human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, so that you understand why we're driving this message out to you, and then put it in the context of Crime Stoppers, so that if they have a friend or a classmate that is being groomed or exploited, they can intervene by contacting Crime Stoppers and being safe and anonymous. So we do have a wide range of programming. And unfortunately, we were actually about to launch a new initiative this coming fall, but it depends on what happens with the pandemic. But we also know that there's an issue with impairment and driving while impaired. So we had just created this very unique concept where we were going to be going into the schools. We have impairment goggles. We have little tasks that the young people can participate in. And the big thing about impairment is you don't know what it feels like to be impaired until you are impaired. So we were going to go into the schools and have these young people put on the goggles and do the activities and attempt to accomplish even simple tasks and understand, oh, this is what everybody's talking about. So I could never drive a car if I can't pick up my cell phone off the floor. So again, that's on hold right now, but we're always looking for new ways to engage, and whether it's an awareness opportunity, a partnership like we've already discussed, there's always something new that we can be talking about with Crime Stoppers.
Oh, that's really well said. Wow. Jensen, did you want to jump in? Well, thank you. That was awesome, Sarah. Really great. Thank you very much. Jensen, then I'm going to double back to you if you don't mind, and then pick up on the conversation with why people come to Women in Crisis and what are some of the reasons they may need the service. So some of the services you offer specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we deal with gender-based violence, but we know that gender-based violence is really a big umbrella for sexual, domestic violence, and human trafficking. But it's one thing I wanted to drive home to is that you don't have to be currently experiencing these issues. And we also deal with childhood abuse and trauma from that, as well as provide services and information for friends and family of those who might have been affected by gender-based violence. So I'll just mention about a few of our services. So we have Marianne's Place, which is our emergency shelter, which provides safe and accessible emergency housing, as well as can help connect folks to long-term housing supports as well. So this is for folks who are primarily dealing with abuse that's in the home, and home is not a safe place. And so the best way for them to experience safety is to be separated from their abusive home situation. So that's what Marianne's Place is about. We also have our Sexual Assault Center, which provides therapeutic trauma counseling to those who have experienced any form of sexual violence. So sexual assault, sexual harassment, as I mentioned, childhood sexual abuse as well. So really this is for folks who are experiencing trauma related to sexual violence and provides a lot of therapeutic trauma counseling, as well as can provide connections to our other programs and services. So for those who might have experienced sexual violence, they may also be dealing with issues around housing and want access to information about other services. We have our transitional and housing support program, which primarily deals with domestic violence and those who have experienced intimate partner violence. So this really revolves around safety planning, I think, primarily, and ensuring that folks have a safety plan of being able to keep themselves safe, whether they're in their home with their abusive partner and they're thinking potentially about leaving. It's really about ensuring that their lives can be as violence-free as possible and making a safety plan for them and their children as well. We do counseling through this program and access to housing is a big one. So really providing supports and practical assistance that can help individuals in their transition from a life that's touched by abuse to a life that is free of violence. We also have our Rural Women Support Program, which provides support to those in Wellington County, as we know that it's more difficult when you're in a rural area to access support services, whether there's a physical distance between you and a support service, or that's lack of internet access, supports that are available in the community that can help connect you. So that's really what this program is about, to address that need in Wellington County to ensure that access to counseling, housing, practical assistance is equally available to those in the county as well. We also have our family court support program. So this is for women who are experiencing abuse, who have started the family court process or are thinking of starting. And it helps navigate custody and access issues. It helps to gather evidence and paperwork to demonstrate a history of abuse, helps with referrals to lawyers in the community and safety planning when it comes to court procedures. So we see this as actually being a service that is really has a high demand in terms of our agency. All of our programs and services do, but we see particularly, and I said, a layered of some women might need service and access to housing and also need legal support services. So it really is a matter of making sure that they can navigate through our services in a way that's most beneficial to them. And then we also have our anti-human trafficking program, which provides counseling, safety planning and risk assessment, and referrals to other community agencies to those who are or have experienced human trafficking. And that anti-human trafficking program really connects with my program as well, which is in public education and violence prevention, and ensuring that youth all the way up to seniors have the information about what human trafficking is and knowing the warning signs. And we've been doing a lot of educational programming around that issue. So in terms of why someone might access our services, they might be reaching out to us seeking information to see what we offer. They might be wanting to leave abusive relationship and wanting more information about how to do that and do that safely. They might be living with their abusers and wanting access to safe housing. They might be concerned for their own safety, the safety of their children. They might be in a very high risk situation. And for those who are community members reaching out to me about public education, really folks are wanting to know more, because when you know more, you're able to do more. So that's really my program, is utilizing education in violence prevention and doing workshops and trainings and events from those in secondary, post-secondary, for workplaces, for community organizations, and for the general public as well, because we know that we can't do this work alone. And the more people who are empowered in the skills of being able to know, as we talked about earlier, how to refer folks to our services, and even just knowing more about the impacts of trauma, the better world that we can create for survivors, as well as the better world that we can create that is safer and doesn't tolerate violence.
Amazing. Any questions at all? Sunil?
I have a question. Just I was thinking, every time I hear for domestic violence or other fights, always the thinking, people think right away, oh, man is the one who's doing it. But a lot of time, women also do some things, but I'm just, because a lot of programs are there for women, domestic violence, women, this, whatever, for everybody. But nothing is there for men, which I never heard. And I know a lot of people too. And what I hear from them, sometimes they are like anxious or depressed because they have a lot of things going on in the family with the wife or whatever. And they don't want to fight, they don't want to do the violence, or like not everybody is a violent lover, right? So people just goes down in thinking. Do we have any programs for men also? Because the time is changed now, like everybody's used to be different stories, like man, woman, whatever. Now everybody is same, right? So do we have like any programs for men also? That's what my question is. Like there's so many men, they don't say because it's a man thing kind of thing, like oh, what people are gonna say. No, like if you have a problem, you want to fix everything else, go get the mentoring or consultation or something, guidance or whatever, like talk to somebody, release your stress or whatever, those kind of things. So I just want to know about if there's anything, please share that on our program. And also maybe Lynn, we can put their links on our website too, to share more information to our viewers. The more awareness, the more better. Please,
Absolutely.
Anybody can say about this.
Who would like to jump in? Any programs for men out there that you're aware of?
Yeah, we usually refer folks to community justice initiatives. They have a lot of programs and services there as well for male survivors. As well, we have, there's different male allyship programs. So the Sexual Assault Support Center of Waterloo region is one great example of a male allyship program that involves men in doing this educational work and teaching other men about these issues, but also breaking down the barriers, because As you kind of touched on, it can be difficult for men who are experiencing abuse to talk about these things, because we know that with traditional gender roles and stereotypes, that men and what it means to be masculine can sometimes mean, you know, hiding emotions. And we want to kind of break that down as well, as to create where it's more open and able to have those conversations. So community justice initiatives is a great one. There is a male survivors hotline, which I can't remember the name of, but I can try to get that to you folks if you wanted to include it in the links to this session. But just, yeah, looking up for like male resources for survivors and trying to find access to those services. It is more challenging, I will say, to access those services than it is for women experiencing gender-based violence. And I will say that a lot of that as well has to do with funding, and that a lot of organizations who receive government funding who do gender-based violence work receive that funding to support women. And so I think it is too a matter of, at the government level, lobbying to make sure that we can provide more inclusive services to all of those who experience gender-based violence.
And that's an educational process, right? Raising awareness regarding that, because the mindset is it's really just been women that have been needing that service, right? Sarah, did you want to add into that what Jensen was saying, or yeah?
No, that's Jensen's expertise right there when it comes to dealing with clients and referrals and things like that. I think she covered it perfectly.
Could I then ask about the rural aspect of things, accessing those resources, and how isolating that can be if someone is from a rural community and perhaps doesn't have the technology to connect or link in?
Yeah, so it can be a challenge, particularly with, I know folks from the Rural Women's Support Program, in terms of how they've been seeing clients. A lot of it is over the phone, so not a video chat, as we know that there can be challenges with access to internet that way. But as well, in terms of, you know, our shelter that we have for our agency is in Guelph. But we do offer, you know, that Rural Women's Support Program. But when it comes to our Guelph General Hospital has a domestic violence and treatment care center also located in Guelph. So we see that the areas that have more of an urban, I would say, capacity for building, often city focused and urban centric. So it really is a matter of being able to provide connections to services and whether or not, and making those connections more available by phone. Right now with COVID, it's been a bit more challenging, but something that we have done as well is to try to have like volunteer drivers, or to connect with local cab agencies who can help us and provide funding for us to get folks physically transported to services and access to support services there. Because like I said, it is sometimes a physical distance and a barrier between yourself and being able to access a service. As well, that sometimes, as we know, that abusers utilize isolation as a tactic of power and control. And when folks are living in rural areas, that can be exacerbated as they know that they can't necessarily, like, we don't necessarily have a neighbor who's seeing those issues take place. And you don't necessarily, it might be happening behind closed doors or greater distance amongst households, greater distances amongst family members and friends. And so sometimes we will see, you know, abusers utilize that further isolation to help them gain power and control over their partners as well. We've seen people take away car keys and access to transportation that way. So that's why I think having programs available in rural areas and in counties is very crucial to this work, and particularly, you know, in northern and indigenous communities, and having access to support services everywhere. That is does very well, and that is partially due to the way that we're prioritized as organizations, that the majority of communities will have a gender-based violence survivor support organization. And as well, another thing that's great about provincial and national hotlines is to be able to at least provide some support that way as well.
Well, thank you very much. From my knowledge, I'm not very aware of it, but maybe you could enlighten me about sibling violence and in terms of that umbrella, and how one would approach that in using the service for, let's say, women in crisis, or connecting for a conversation with Sarah at a school, and maybe are experiencing that with a brother or sister, but not necessarily comfortable to report something like that to their parents. Is if they're older and they wanted to access the service, is that something they could do if they were 16 plus?
I mean, in terms of that is part of like domestic and family violence. And so for us, our services are for those who we do offer folks who have experienced childhood abuse, but might be processing it in adulthood. For us at our agency, we primarily serve those who identify as women. So if they're male identified, then for those individuals reaching out. But I think that's also important that when we do our education in schools and talk about healthy relationships, that, you know, we don't just talk about them in the sense of a romantic relationship, and that those relationships are with our friends or family members and others in the community, to be able to realize, you know, what is healthy as well, being trauma informed. Some folks might think that, oh, you're an adult and you're still processing something from childhood, and that's the process. Right? So we need to kind of combat that misconception and make things more, particularly being able to talk openly about their experiences is, you know, seen as, you know, a sign of weakness to talk about your emotions and your experiences with abuse. Yeah, I would say that we would be able to provide some resources and information. And for folks who aren't sure what they're looking for, or aren't sure if they can access services through us, like I said, our 24-hour crisis line and some of the national and provincial hotlines as well will be able to direct services that might be most beneficial to you. So that could be, you know, family counseling services, that could be children and family services, it could be another organization in the community. So if not us, if not Crime Stoppers, then I think we were both able to provide pretty solid connections to other organizations that might be able to provide.
Thank you. You're such a great speaker, Jensen, and you as well, Sarah. I love listening to you both talk. Lots of education there. Being from the teaching background as well, I do appreciate how important it is to start all of this at a very young age, and I really value the work that's being done in the school. As far as in money to be able to do that for you at Women in Crisis, where do you get that from, Jensen, to get that information out to people in the school system? Where do you get the resource to do that? Is someone paying that?
So my position as a public educator, and this is a position that every center, at least in Ontario, has, is a public educator recognizing the position. So my position is funded, so I'm a permanent staff member and part of the team. We do get some aid through government grants or community grants that's kind of positions, such as 2016, we now have a permanent anti-human trafficking.
Since 2016?
Yeah,
it's just cutting out a little bit.
Oh, so sorry.
Okay, that's all good.
Problems. I'm not sure what where I cut off there. If you,
let's say 2016. So 2016, the funding, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for 2016, we now have a permanent anti-human trafficking counselor, and so when it comes to funding, we'll see issues be prioritized that are essential to the organization and the work that we do, and then dedicated funding goes towards that. So for my position in public education, that's one of those permanent dedicated funding positions. And so for folks who want to access my public education through my workshops and trainings, they're all free, as I said, to make that as accessible and publicly available as possible. We do, if folks want to make a donation as an honorarium, if they have the means, they're more than welcome and encouraged to do that, as it helps us continue to provide and expand our programs as well to meet the needs of the community. For example, with COVID, we've had to, purchase Zoom accounts and purchase different headsets and abilities to make our online programming more accessible. So having that funding and making those donations help improve the programs that we're currently doing and help us expand our services as well to be able to meet the needs of clients in our communities. So some of our funding comes from government grants and other community grants, and a lot of it does come from, the same as with Sarah's program, fundraising and community donors.
Mhm. Sarah, I wonder if you could speak to sort of programs across the Canada, perhaps just sort of generally speaking, and I guess sort of a wish list moving forward for the program, if you will. You know, how important it is for, you know, cities to have Crime Stoppers and some of the resources that may be needed to help moving forward with some of the things as we navigate change, as you talk about human trafficking, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. What I'm seeing, you know, as a program coordinator, is the biggest challenge is support from our police services, because not every service, you know, is able to either have the staffing. You know, in my case, being assigned to this role, they are taxed with their staffing, or financially. You know, maybe they just don't have the funding in place, because it's not just OPP that supports Crime Stoppers. There are also municipal services across Canada that support Crime Stoppers. Alongside with that, I would say another challenge that programs face are legal challenges. And what that really looks like is when an individual is charged and they go through the court process, there could be an opportunity where defense counsel might want to challenge the information sourced by the investigator. Now, there's no problem, and we could have a whole conversation about, you know, the legalities in case law, but that might be a little dry. But what it looks like is that we are protected by case law, which means the Supreme Court of Canada has said that a tipster that goes through Crime Stoppers is protected by anonymity. They do not have to disclose who they are. And even if Crime Stoppers knew who they were, we would not disclose that information. So we are being very careful in that we protect these individuals that are so bravely coming forward. But what can happen from time to time is defense counsel may object to information that is being provided by an investigator, and they may put a demand for disclosure to the court, and that gets a little sticky, and it can be problematic. We've had case law in our favor since 1997, so there's no concern that anyone would be identified through Crime Stoppers. But these legal challenges can be very costly for a local program. And knock on wood, we've not had legal challenges locally, but I know of programs that have had legal costs of tens of hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's a huge problem as a not-for-profit organization when suddenly you're in the position of having to pay for legal fees, you know, having a defense mounted. In some cases, it can take weeks or months. We've had cases that have gone right through to the Supreme Court of Canada, subsequent to our initial case law case. And that's where, you know, you can go to work one day and think everything's fine, and the next day you have a legal challenge. So, you know, that's just part of this work. As far as, you know, other commonalities with programs across Canada, I know COVID has definitely impacted programs across Canada. And if, you know, people are watching this program across Canada, I would encourage them to see if there's a way that they can support financially to their programs. In Guelph-Wellington, we went into the pandemic fairly strong. We were fortunate in that we were sound financially and in good footing with our program. But not all programs have that luxury, and they're really feeling it now. So, you know, this next year can make a difference for some programs, whether or not they're able to move forward or what it looks like to move forward. But that's certainly a common theme that we're seeing across Canada.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Jensen, in terms of women in crisis in different communities across Canada, are there, yeah, is there quite a few? Is it, you know, for anyone who doesn't know, learning for the first time about women in crisis, are there a lot of agencies? Yeah.
So for Ontario, for listeners who are listening, if you are in Ontario, you can check out the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres, and that you can search from where your location is to see what types of supports are available. And there's other supports if you're listening nationally. One way to search for those is, you know, gender-based violence organizations, violence against women services, rape crisis centers, sexual assault center, really depending on the issue that you're looking for to find a community initiative that could be able to provide support for folks, and for those as well, like the Assaulted Women's Helpline or a national helpline that can help at least provide some information and may be able to help you find something nationally or locally as well. And so most organizations, most communities do have some sort of gender-based violence organization. It might be a standalone organization like us, like Guelph-Wellington Women in Crisis, or it could be, you know, a program that's offered through another service, such as a community health center. A lot of hospitals might have programs as well and access to support services. So just looking for services in ways that informal ways, such as through programs, and asking even, you know, a family doctor might have some information about services in the community. So for the most part, I would say that the government provincially and nationally has really prioritized gender-based violence and gender-based violence organizations as essential services. And so pretty much everywhere you will find an organization that will be able to provide support.
Incredible. So now you had raised your hand. You wanted me to question? Oh, no, you're passing on from that. I guess for a wish list for you and Women in Crisis, I know it's a very difficult work that you do, and education is so important, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be doing that for us. But Jensen, what is, you know, sort of a wish list for you in terms of getting more education out there? I don't know, I guess if you were to give advice to anyone out there, maybe even getting into the field and they wanted to pursue it as a career for that matter, what difference can they make?
Yeah, I would say that individuals have such a crucial role to play in this work. It's not just professionals, it's not just organizations. It is individuals being able to call out harmful behaviors when they see them happening, being able to be active bystanders to make a difference, because you never know what those around you have experienced, and you offering that support and standing up for someone in an instance where, you know, there might be a joke around abusive relationships taking place, or someone not taking your experience seriously and having that strong voice to say, you know, I believe you and I'm here for you. I think that's so incredibly valuable. And so recognizing that, you know, from a young age, you have the agency and empowerment to be able to call out these harmful systems of oppression that perpetuate gender-based violence. And as well, for anyone who's interested in getting into this work, I would just recommend, you know, seeking out every opportunity you can to learn more, and recognizing that your learning is never done, and that learning can come from academic experience, but it can also come from lived experience as well, and just wanting to spread the word about gender-based violence, about consent and the importance of healthy relationships. I think that is a really key element. That's for me, how I got into this work as well, was promoting it when I was a student at my university campus and getting involved with campus organizations who I felt were doing, you know, similar activist work. So volunteering your time, I guess everyone to see themselves as being involved in this work and seeing themselves as having a role in that. And for anyone who's listening who is an educator, so whether you're teaching in elementary, secondary, post-secondary, to invite your local gender-based violence organization to help you with a lesson plan, or to help speak in your classroom, to help us get into those spaces, because oftentimes it's us reaching out and wanting to get in, and it would be amazing if we were receiving invites all over to come and to speak to in our communities. So I would just say looking into whatever educational resources are available, because when we have that knowledge and that power, then we're able to help spread it to others in our communities. So I think for those who are listening, look out for your local gender-based violence organization. If you're in Guelph-Wellington, look for Guelph-Wellington Women in Crisis, and learn more about what they're doing and how you can support, whether that's through a financial donation, whether that's through volunteering your time, whether that's attending a workshop, or referring our services to others in the community that you may know who are seeking support.
Awesome. really awesome. Sunil?
I was just thinking, the best thing is to talk to somebody. Anything you have in your mind, don't hold it. Just talk to somebody who you believe, who you trust. You know, you can talk to anybody and everybody, right? So talk to somebody, still can get help. Look for the numbers, look for the local organizations, look for any any non-profit organization, go and contact them. They will help you out. They will give you the right numbers for counseling, and the things are available there, but you have to find. I think the first thing starts from talk to somebody, release your thing, whatever you are holding in your mind. Any advice on this?
Sarah? From a Crime Stoppers perspective, the talking to someone, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a great time to make the point that some people won't come forward with information about crime because they're afraid they'll get someone in trouble. I don't know if it's the right person. I don't know if the information I have is the accurate information. And I would encourage anyone who is maybe fearful of coming forward not to be, because, again, any information that comes to Crime Stoppers is just that, it's information. And Sunil, from your background, information is not evidence. Evidence is completely different. So the investigator must conduct an investigation to determine if there's evidence. So for example, if someone, or if I was going to give a tip and I thought, perhaps they're talking about Lynn, but I don't want to get Lynn in trouble if Lynn didn't commit the crime. So I would give the information to Crime Stoppers. The police would still have to conduct an investigation. And if there's nothing to support the allegation, which is really what a tip is, it's just an allegation, then Lynn's not going to be arrested. There's not going to be a negative outcome for you. And I think people need to realize that they're so concerned about, I don't want to cause a problem for someone else, or I don't want to do the wrong thing, that they don't do the right thing, in that same action. So I would encourage you to please come forward with even the smallest bit of information. You don't know where an investigator is with their investigation. And we always use the analogy of your tip could be the missing piece of the puzzle, right? The investigator has the whole case that they're working on, and they just need that little bit of information to push it over to maybe get a warrant for an arrest. So please come forward with that information.
Thank you.
We need to change the mentality of the people, that some people think, if I'm going to tell them, maybe they're going to come back to me or something. I don't want any trouble for myself or for the other person.
Yeah.
So we have to change. We need more work, more connections, more engagement. Everybody have to work together to fix these things for everybody.
In terms of mentorship and leadership training for any youth in the school system, with this type of what we're talking about actually in terms of education, is there something out there if someone wanted to be mentored by someone else about the knowledge of this in the community, or be a part of that and educating others? Let's say a teenager kind of wanted to be a part of Crime Stoppers. Are they able to do that? Are they able to do school hours, or how does that work?
We did in normal times. I know I keep saying in normal times, but we did offer volunteer hours, and that would usually be through our fundraisers, or we would do things like parades or different community activities where we engage a young person and put them to work either physically or use your communication skills. And we always had a great time. That's one thing I feel very strongly about our fundraising and our volunteerism, is we have fun, and we have a good core group of people that keep coming back. We're always open to more people coming out and joining us when we're able to do things again in the community. But for sure, Lynn, any young person in our area that is interested in volunteer hours, they can contact us by going to our website at www.csgw.tips, and they can contact us, let us know where they are located and what activities they might be interested in. If it's something that they want to be more physical and be part of a fundraising activity that involves lifting or walking, that type of thing. But there's always new opportunities, and we welcome the chance to engage our young people. It's so important to the longevity of our program.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What about yourself, Jensen, in terms of women in crisis? Is there an opportunity behind the scenes, so to speak, or in other ways, other avenues for a teenager to get involved, a youth to put in some community hours?
Yeah, definitely. One of the ways that you can get involved is through attending our events. At the moment, they are virtual, but one event that we do every year and that a lot of rape crisis centers do every year is something called Take Back the Night. And that's an event for youth, for community members to be able to show up and support survivors in the community by engaging in performances and a march where we really show up to the community that this is one that doesn't tolerate violence and is one that protects and supports survivors. And that's a really empowering event for youth sometimes to get involved in this work.
Sure.
You can also volunteer with us. At the moment, our volunteer program is on hold with COVID because a lot of our volunteers we rely on for a lot of in-person work, but as well for youth who are in high schools, we have a lot of great support from youth in their schools who want to do donation drives for us, who reach out to us and say, I want to learn more. How can I support this? How can I have conversations with my friends about consent? So I think just having that curiosity of wanting to know and do more, you can always reach out to your gender-based violence organization to see how you can support this work, because we will always find a way, as we're always wanting to engage as many people as possible to help support us in this.
Wow, that's what it's all about right there, shining light on the community. That's what we're about, spotlight on community. And I'm just thrilled that you guys have been here today. Thank you so much for both of you. I just learned a lot. Sunil, I thank you for being here as well today. I think we're going to wrap up our program. It's our second session of domestic violence, but we had an opportunity to talk about other things with Sarah and Jensen as well. You have been our experts. We value your opinions so much, and thank you for teaching us. Anything, Sunil, from yourself before we go?
No. We learned a lot of things, and I hope a lot of people are going to watch this program and learn and going to call them and bother them. That's what we want.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. I'm honored for that you were here today to Sarah Bowers-Peter from Crime Stoppers and Jensen Williams from Women in Crisis. My name is Lynn McEntee. I've been your host for Spotlight on Community through Moksha Canada Foundation. And please follow us, give us some ideas for any shows upcoming, or get involved, really get involved. There's lots going on with Moksha Canada Foundation, 365 days a year. Thank you so much for joining us. mokshacanada.com. Bye, everyone.